All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to VITI 303. This is our um, exam number 2 review session. So today is Monday, November 11th. Yes, November. We're already here. This semester is going by super fast. Your exam number 2 will be on Wednesday, November 13th. So Wednesday is normally a day that we meet in person, but we'll be using that time to take your exam online. So let me turn down my volume here really quick, just a little bit. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, awesome. So today I'm going to go over the content for our exam, just like we did for exam number 1. I'll be posting this to YouTube for anyone that would like to use this as a review tool. And the topics that we'll be going over for exam number 2 will be Lecture 6, Soil Basics, Lecture 7, Vineyard Nutrient Management, Lecture 8, Cover Crop, Lecture 9, Grape Varieties, the Soil Labs, and we'll also be testing you on your grape nutrient poster assignments. So I've actually uploaded all of your guys' posters to files. I'll show you that, and then you'll be quiz based off of the content from those posters. And then we also have our grape variety lab, which we're going to have this Wednesday in class. And we can also use time during that class to ask any questions that you have from this video about the exam. That will be upcoming and anything else. And a couple folks still need to finish their soil labs that missed it. Your samples are still in the classroom and they are still available for you there. So let's just go ahead and start with, just go down the list. So we'll start with lecture 6, which is soil basics. Go ahead and I'll get this nice and big for you guys. All right, soil basics. Okay, so just like for exam number 1, a really good way to study for these exams is to watch this video, of course, but also to go to the end of each presentation and look at your student learning objectives. I will pull questions from here. I'll also pull questions from your previous quizzes as well. Those are all really good study tools. So yeah, let's just go through this one. We're definitely going to have some vocabulary words in this one. The difference between soil profile and soil texture and what organic composition is. Being able to define horizons will be very important, and also to differentiate between the different types of horizons be very important too. It's important to know how they're made and how they move. Yes, all good things. Okay. Soil composition, most of it's mineral, right? And then we have air, water, and organic matter, both from what's alive and what is also decaying. And then soil texture, right? The 3 different types of textures are sand, silt, and clay, right? Loam is a combination of those things. But if I ask you what are the 3 types, sand, silt, and clay will be the answers that I'm looking for. We're definitely going to use this table in our exam again. So make sure you feel comfortable knowing how to use this. Since you're going to be taking this exam at home, if it helps you the most to have this printed out so you can use a ruler and draw the lines and see where they intersect, I recommend that you do that. I will supply the table for you on the questions so you can visually see it, but if you need to map it out and draw it out by hand, definitely print out a table for yourself before you get started. You are allowed to do that. That's no problem. But I will give you the percentages and ask you to identify what the soil texture is. We did this in class. This was our jar test for determining soil texture and type. I might have a couple of questions about what this lab was like for you, or anything that you observed personally during this lab. Water holding capacity, we didn't really get to, we made an attempt to, well, we did this with the percolation method, right, during lab, but we tried to do an infiltration test too. That was kind of successful. But yeah, just knowing the concept of water holding capacity and the difference between the wilting point and the field capacity, and then the available water, what that is, and also know the relationship, right? So the higher your field capacity, the less often you'll need to irrigate your vines. That will be important. That's a good true or false right there. Okay. So we have saturation, right? When the pores are full of water. Field capacity, which is the water that's left over after all the excess seeps out from gravity, right? And then the wilting point is when all that water is lost and there's no water available to any of the plants, right? So I might ask you to define and describe those, but then also describe what soils may be like that keep a higher field capacity. So deeper soils, and then also soils with high organic matter will make a big difference. Next, we have texture versus structure. And one moment, sorry. Okay. Texture versus structure. So this is a really good thing to ask on the exam. So structure will be like the aggregation and like the health of the soil, and then texture is just the relative parts of sand, silt, and clay. So that would be a really good short answer question for you guys to review for the exam. Cool. How aggregates form, I'd put a star on the slide. It's really important to know what aggregates are and how they form, and then also how they contribute to the health of the soil. So all these points are good points to talk about. I would like you guys to know that about the fungi and the glomalin, these organic substances that are present in the soil there. Cool. And then also be able to place together the water capacity and drainage abilities of those soils too. Cool. Okay, then we have water infiltration. So this is, the ability for water to move through soil, right? And we care about this because if it has a hard time going through the soil, that's a sign of compaction. So it's less porous, it's difficult for the water to get through. Less disturbed soils will have a better infiltration rates, right? So if I ask you a question on the exam about water infiltration, um, I would want you to bring up it's important because it can help you determine compaction or not. So that would be important. Okay, bulk density is also an indication of compaction. So to be like the density of the soil and like the abundance or lack of pores or porosity in the soil. We didn't do this in our lab, but it is important to know the relationship of the measurement of bulk density and how it is related to soil compaction. So I won't ask you to do any calculations, but just know that relationship. That is important. And then also just be able to talk about why soil compaction is a problem, right? It's not good for the roots, it's not good for the plant, it's not good for soil health, flooding and erosion, just not a good time all around. Cool. So this other good vocabulary question here, evapotranspiration, understanding that water is transpired by plants while they photosynthesize, and water evaporates also from the soil surface. And then understanding its relationship to field capacity there too. Very good question right there. For the questions about bulk density or infiltration, the big points I want you guys to take away from this is what the test is and what it's testing for in the soil. Like um, whole bulk density has to do with, of course, the density of the soil, but also it has to do with like permeability, right? Like, why do we care about this test? How does this reflect the health of the vineyard? Is what I'm trying to say. So know the test, know what it does specifically, and what it's testing for in the vineyard are the most important takeaways I want you guys to take from this, right? So bulk density, the infiltration test, and then we go over a couple more in the lab. So from here, I'll actually just jump right over to the soil lab, and we will look at that since we're talking about soil. And I'll make this much bigger. Okay, so for our soil lab, we did a couple different activities, and they were spanned over the course of a couple different labs. So I know it can be a little bit confusing. So the first exercise we did was the percolation method, where we took the cylinders and the coffee filters, we ground up our samples, and we poured water through them, and then we calculated the soil water holding capacity based off of how much water stayed in that soil sample and how much drained out, right? So that was percent water holding capacity. And for that, we used this table right here. And we used this calculation. So it was the volume of water retained, which was the the difference between the total water that you poured and what went through, right? So the water retained divided by the weight of the sample times 100. So that was the percent water holding capacity. This would be a really good exam question, and I would, of course, provide you with the formula. So if the formula is confusing at all, or if you need some practice, we can talk about it in class on Wednesday, or you can send me an email. But that would be a really good exam question, and like I said, I'll definitely provide the formula for you. Cool. Okay, the next thing that we did in our soil lab was the infiltration rates, and this was that beautifully painful exercise where we took that metal ring and we pounded it into the ground. Then we laid down that plastic shrink wrap, put water on top of it, and then pulled out the shrink wrap and started a timer so we could see exactly how long it took an inch of water to pass through the soil surface in that ring, right? So that was a very long practice, and we didn't really come to a lot of good conclusions other than the soil outside of the classroom is very compacted, because it was the water had a very hard time moving through it. So we're not going to have like a lot of questions or calculations for this, but I would like you to know like what infiltration rate is, why it's important, compaction, right? And I'd also like you to know that it's expressed in inches per hour. And then just understand that, water is going to move through sand very, very quickly, and it's going to move through clay very slowly. So that is how that will go. Okay, so that's what you'll need to know for infiltration rate. For our soil texture lab, this is when we use the mason jar and then we use the chart to determine our soil texture. So this guy. So like I said, please print this out or you can use this table from your lab. I'll give these back to you guys on Wednesday, or have them printed out at home if you need to draw on it and use it for reference. I will provide you with the percentages of the clay, silt, and sand, and then I will ask you to identify the soil texture based off of that. So that will be good. Okay. And then bulk density. Not going to be any calculations on bulk density. Like I said, just understand what it is and why it is measured in the vineyard or just in general. Okay. So we covered soil basics, and that was just the soil lab. So now I'll move on to lecture 7, which is vineyard nutrient management, which is very important. Make this bigger for you guys. Okay, vineyard nutrient management. Okay, so just kind of like how we talked about with terroir, how like every vineyard is different and the concept is different, right? So there's no like one program fits all. Not every vineyard is the same, especially for vineyard nutrition and management, right? Um, I will ask you a question about like what that program depends on. So any of these bullet points be perfect answers for that. And also, it would be really important for you to know the difference to memorize the macronutrients versus micronutrients. And we'll go from this presentation over to our poster projects. So those should be on those posters. I believe they are on all of them. And you can reference that there as well. Cool. So, soil health and soil nutrition, right? We have visual, soil, and tissue analysis. There'll definitely be questions on all three of these types of observations. So, it's going to be important that you know the difference between soil and tissue analysis, when you'd use them, why one would be more advantageous than the other, and then what visual observations can give you as well. So visual observations, right? We have lots of different things. We have chlorosis, which is it's the lightening from green to yellowing. Necrosis is cell death. So even though this looks very pretty, these are dead cells. These reddish purple color. And then also there's in the leaves, but also the berries, hens and chicks, right? So it's important to know the macronutrients and micronutrients because that can indicate what part of the vine is having a nutritional deficiency, right? So macronutrients are very mobile, micronutrients are mostly immobile. So macronutrient deficiency will be shown in older, more developed leaves because that's where nutrients are being pulled from. And then micronutrients are deficiencies are going to be shown in the smaller, younger leaves. So that will be something that will help you remember, help to identify what these deficiencies will be on the exam. Cool. It is important to know that herbicide toxicity or insect infestation can also be symptoms that are shown on the leaves, like in the foliar part of the vine, right? It's not always a super complicated nutrient situation. It could be that potentially you over applied nutrients or you have an insect that's like physically eating away at your plant too. And it's not always just one thing. Sometimes there's a compound, multiple situational like happening to your vines as well. Cool. So here's a nice little chart that will show you where deficiencies are going to first appear. Take a look at that to help you study soil analysis. The wonderful thing about it is it will tell you what's in the soil, but doesn't always tell you what is actively being taken up by the grapevine, right? That is a downfall of soil analysis. So we have chemical imbalances like pH is something that you're going to want to look out for with your soil analysis, salinity, cation imbalances, and also excess boron. And then just know the downfalls. Just very like broad information, right? Sometimes if it gets really overwhelming or tedious to know this information, just kind of like take away the big picture and make sure you understand the forest before you go in for like the individual trees. So for analysis, same areas will be helpful. Taking multiple samples will be helpful from within a block, so that way you get a good representation. And then also from different depths, right? So our roots aren't just within 0 to 8 inches. Grapevine roots go so deep. So their interaction with the soil environment is a lot more complicated than just the top surface of the soil, right? Just the tip of the iceberg. So That would be the big takeaway from here. I'm not going to ask you about any of this chart. This is just for your information, um, what a soil analysis would look like if you got results. Okay. If I had a question about the slide, it would be something along the lines of why you would want to measure soil before you plant a vineyard, right? You want to know what you're getting into before you drop a bunch of money on this project, right? Also, if you need to make any amendments, it's a lot easier to make amendments to your soil before you have a bunch of vines and stuff in the way. So, I would have a good question about that. So, that might be good to study. Soil pH. It's very important. It's what determines the accessibility of these nutrients for the vine. Optimum soil pH between 6 and 7. This would be a really good multiple choice or true or false question. Just knowing the optimum pH and also being able to comprehend, like understand and tell me that depending on the pH, different levels of these nutrients become more or less accessible, and sometimes they reach like toxic levels depending on the pH, right? I'm not going to ask you to memorize, what's available at what range, but just being able to give me the big picture of like, yeah, some are more or less soluble depending on the pH, and there's a specific range that is like the most healthy and beneficial where all of them are utilized for the plant. So that'd be like the answer that I'd be looking for. Okay, soil pH. At high pH, iron and zinc become less available. Don't worry about memorizing that. That's a lot of information. Just understanding that high pH versus low pH, neither one of those are ideal, right? However, I would like you to know what is used in correcting soil pH. So, to increase acidity, gypsum, sulfur, organic matter, or also decrease the acidity in soil, you can use lime. I'm sure there are other things out there too. This was just one of the resources that I found. So, correcting soil pH, put a star next to that. That would be important. I know on the quiz there was a question about a pH meter. Don't worry about how it's measured. We didn't do this in lab, so I'm not going to ask you that on the exam. Okay. Cation exchange capacity. I don't think I'm going to really ask much about this. I think. I think there will be a question about how texture affects nutrient availability. So we could talk about the pores and how nutrients are retained or lost. If you are confused about the CEC or cation exchange capacity on this, don't worry too much about that. Where I will ask you about it is if you could just understand the definition, the measure of a soil's ability to attract and hold positively charged nutrient cations. Um, and if you understand that's how these, you know, elements and how these nutrients transfer to the roots and to the vine, that is the most important like big picture of this. If this was a UC Davis course and I was prepping you for um, research and to writing research papers, then it would be a different story. But that's not our situation. So just understanding what it is and being able to recognize it is the most important part. Okay, so again, we talk about mobile and immobile nutrients, macro versus micronutrients, right? So that will be very important to know there. Do, 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 do. Awesome. Okay, and then we have tissue analysis. So petiole versus leaf blade. Be good to know the difference between these two for sure. And why you'd want to do tissue analysis. That'd be a good question as well. Timing of sampling. I don't think I'm going to ask about timing of sampling. This is more for your information. But this is important to me, petiole versus leaf blade. So understanding um, which sampling has mobile or immobile nutrients and why you'd want to measure either of those. So put a star on this slide for sure. Okay, nutrient concentrations that fluctuate with growing season. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you anything about that. That's just for your information. For your information. I do think this is important. If I had a hypothetical question of, a friend of yours owns a vineyard and they have something that's an outbreak of something in their vineyard they're not quite sure of and they want to take samples, like what would you recommend? How would you recommend they take those samples or something like that, right? So make sure that if it's just that one variety or if it's all varieties are affected by this, um, making sure that they take samples in different soil areas. If it's just by a foliar situation by vine appearance, definitely sample that vine and the leaves that are affected, right? Or if you're trying to see if it's a deficiency between fertilizer application, irrigation, or anything like that, knowing that would be important. Okay. So, knowing which leaves to collect, I would like you guys to know this, right? So just check out these pictures here. Taking the leaf directly across from the cluster at full bloom will be important. And then at veraison, petioles should come from the youngest fully expanded mature leaves on the shoot, usually 5 to 7 leaves back from the tip of the shoot. So that would be good to know. I'll make sure you guys are sampling the right part of the vine. Don't worry about this. This is just for your information. And okay, and then we have student learning objectives. So again, always good to review the student learning objectives. I do like to pull from those for the exams, and just a good way to make sure you get the whole picture of that presentation. Okay, so that was vineyard nutrient management. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you guys where the posters are. So if you go to Files in Canvas and you go to Labs, I created a folder called Nutrient Posters right here. And then here we have everyone's posters uploaded. So if you would like to, look at the poster and see if it's presented in a way that makes sense to you for learning and studying for the exam, you're welcome to look through those. It's going to take forever to load. But we also have, excuse me, I also uploaded this PDF from the Grape Growers textbook. And when I originally uploaded this, I apologize. I was very sick. I didn't realize that only the first of 16 pages uploaded for you guys for this assignment as a resource. So I apologize for that, but all 16 pages are now uploaded. So if you are just a reading person or even just for your information you want to read, this will outline like nitrogen is right here. I'll talk about the what the symptoms are, right? What nitrogen toxicity looks like, phosphorus, and so forth, right? So all these pages are scanned in order. I did my best to scan those on my phone. Sorry, it's a little shaky, but what you'll need to know for the exam for this is don't worry about the timing of application. Don't worry about what toxicity looks like. The big thing I want you guys to be able to identify is if I describe a symptom and you can select what nutrient deficiency that is, right? And I'm not going to do anything super, left field or bizarre. It's going to be something very obvious and very indicative of that variety, right? So, like, a nitrogen deficiency would just be like yellowing of the leaves, right? Or I might give you multiple sets of information, like it's yellowing of the leaves and it's a macronutrient, or I might present you a picture and then you could maybe check a possibilities of what it could be, and I give you credit for that. So don't don't worry too much about this. Just do your best for your studying purposes. I'd recommend make a list of the nutrients and then just get the um top two symptoms of deficiencies and try your best to memorize that, and pick the deficiencies that are bizarre, that really stick out for that one nutrient. So just do your best. It'll be okay. I won't be too mean, I promise. Okay, cool. So those are your grape nutrient poster assignments. So next is cover crop. And for that, you guys are going to want to go back to our class schedule and check out the cover crop presentation that's on YouTube. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the slides for that presentation, so I apologize. But just going off of the questions and the learning objectives that were posted on the quiz, will be plenty of information to prepare you for the exam. We'll have very similar questions to what you saw on the quiz, and you're welcome to go back and look at the quiz to study. You should be able to do that right now. If you're not able to do that, please send me an email and I'll look at the settings again. But you should be able to go back and look at all your quizzes to prepare for the exam. So that's what you'll have to do for the cover crop. And like I said, just focus on what we talked about on the quiz and we'll be ready. I'm not going to be mean about that because I don't have a presentation on that yet for you guys. Okay. And that leaves us with grape varieties and the grape variety lab that we're going to have this Wednesday. So when I posted the grape varieties presentation, I was super sick, so I didn't get a chance to record that. I will record this separately and I will post this for your guys' information. But we'll also go over this Wednesday during our lab because we'll actually taste through some wines and talk about grape varieties. And we'll probably talk about a lot of information. And if you're new to the wine industry, it might be overwhelming for you. But the big things I want you guys to know for the exam is kind of generally describe this variety, but know what region it's home to, right? So what is Barbera? It's Italian variety, and what Italian varieties do well in warm climates because they retain a high acidity in the plant. So having some information, this this presentation and this exercise is to really just, it's not just like intended as me throwing a bunch of information at you and you just memorizing it for the sake of class content. This is as a grape grower and as a viticulturist, you have to come into a situation where either you're selling grapes to someone or selling a wine product to someone, and they're going to want to know about the grapes that you're growing, and you're going to have to be able to know about that grape but also describe what that fruit is like to grow, the characteristics that that fruit has, and what that wine might also have, right? So it's important to have a baseline knowledge of these varieties. And of these varieties that we chose for this presentation, these are some of the most commonly found excuse me, varieties in the Sierra foothills, right? So a lot of people produce Barbera, Primitivo, Sangiovese, and you can find Negro Amaro in the Sierra foothills too, right? So we have Italy, France, and these are just the tip of the iceberg of these regions. But again, things that you might find locally that grape growers and winemakers would talk to you about in the tasting room or on the business side on sales and great purchases. So we have Bordeaux, And then we go through the wines and what they're typically like. Bourgogne or Burgundy, talk about that. And then we also have some honorable mentions of wineries in here as well. So we'll go over this more in class on Wednesday. And like I said, I will personally record a presentation just for this and post that as well. And you'll have plenty of time to review that before the exam as well. And I think I did write learning objectives. Yes. Okay. So for the learning objectives, I promise to stick to these learning objectives for the exam. So that way I'm not giving you guys any surprises there. So, and like I said, we'll go over it in Wednesday's class, and I'll have a recording as well. Cool. So that is everything that's going to be on exam number 2. Exam number 2 is not going to be for a little while. I just needed to post this for you guys. And also our class schedule kind of gets a little wonky because of Veterans Day. Um, so today, like I said, is Monday the 4th. This is the exam prep for exam number 2 over Zoom. Wednesday, we're going to have our variety wine tasting lab in class. And then the following Monday is actually Veterans Day, so we don't have class a week from today. So your exam will be Wednesday, not this Wednesday, the following Wednesday on the 13th. And it will just be open online. It'll be available for you to take from 9 a.m. to right before midnight, 11:59 p.m. And it'll be 100 points. You'll have plenty of time to take the exam, but once you open it, you must take it. So plan that accordingly. And same format as the last exam. So true, false, multiple choice, short answer, multiple answer options where you select all that apply, and so forth. So yeah, so that's the plan. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me in class on Wednesday. So with that, I think you guys are going to be good. Be a good exam, and we'll have a fun Veterans Day, and we'll have a good lab this week. So I'm excited.